The muffled thud of the auctioneer's gavel could be heard even through the thin canvas walls of the tent, each strike marking another human life bartered away like cattle in the sweltering summer of 1872. Dahlia Montgomery trembled behind the makeshift stage, her wrists raw from the rope that bound them, her once fine blue dress now soiled with the dust of a 3-week journey across the frontier. She had never imagined her life would come to this, being sold to the highest bidder in a mining town at the edge of civilization. Next up, a fine specimen from Boston, the auctioneer's voice boomed. Education, breeding, and looks to match, starting bid at $50. Dahlia's heart hammered against her ribs as rough hands pushed her forward into the harsh sunlight. The crowd of men, miners, gamblers, and ranchers erupted in whistles and jeers. Their faces blurred together, a sea of leering grins and calculating stares as they assessed her worth. She forced herself to stand tall, refusing to show fear despite the terror coursing through her veins. $60, shouted a bearded man with tobacco-stained teeth. 75, countered another, his bloated belly straining against a filthy waistcoat. The auctioneer grinned, revealing a gold tooth that caught the sunlight. I hear 75. Do I hear 80? $100, came a steady voice from the back of the crowd. The bidding paused as the crowd parted to reveal a tall figure. His face was partially obscured by the brim of a well-worn hat, but Dahlia could make out a strong jaw shadowed with stubble and eyes that seemed to pierce right through her. Unlike the others, he wasn't leering. His gaze was steady, almost respectful. 100 from Mr. Isaac Hart. The auctioneer announced with glee. The cattle baron himself graces us with his presence and his pocketbook. 110, shouted the bearded man, looking annoyed. 150, Isaac Hart countered immediately, his voice remaining even. The bearded man swore and spat on the ground. 175, $200, said Isaac, stepping forward now, his spurs jingling softly against the packed dirt. A hush fell over the crowd. $200 was more than most of these men made in months. The auctioneer's eyes gleamed with avarice. 200 going once. Going twice. He paused, scanning the crowd for any last-minute competitors. Sold to Mr. Isaac Hart for $200. Dahlia felt her knees weaken with relief, though she knew better than to feel true hope. One master might be better than another, but a master was still a master. She was escorted off the stage by a guard who handed her rope to Isaac Hart. Up close, she could see him clearly now. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a stormy sky. He wore simple but quality clothing, a cotton shirt, leather vest, and denim pants tucked into well-made boots. There was no cruelty in his face, but Dahlia had learned that appearances could be deceiving. Come with me, he said quietly, leading her away from the auction tent and toward a wagon at the edge of town. They walked in silence, Dahlia's mind racing with terrifying possibilities of what awaited her. When they reached the wagon, Isaac surprised her by immediately cutting the rope from her wrists with a small knife. I'm not what you think, he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. I have no intention of keeping you against your will. Dahlia rubbed her raw wrists, eyeing him warily. Then why pay such a sum for me? Because no human being should be sold like property, he replied simply, reaching into his saddlebag and pulling out a canteen. Here, drink this. It's just water. She accepted it cautiously, her parched throat overriding her suspicion. The water was cool and clean, and she drank deeply before handing it back. Thank you, she said reflexively, years of proper upbringing asserting themselves even in these circumstances. Isaac nodded. My ranch is about a day's ride from here. I can offer you shelter and safety until you decide what you want to do. There's a small town nearby with a stagecoach station. If you wish to return east, I'll provide you with funds for passage. Dahlia stared at him, unable to comprehend this sudden turn of events. Why would you help me? You don't know me. A shadow crossed his face. Let's just say I've seen enough injustice in this world to last several lifetimes. Now, would you like to sit up front with me, or would you prefer the back of the wagon where you can rest? The front, she said immediately, not wanting to let this stranger out of her sight, regardless of his apparent kindness. He helped her onto the wooden seat, and she noticed he was careful not to touch her more than necessary, as if understanding her fear. As they pulled away from the wretched town, Dahlia cast one last glance at the auction tent, shuddering at how close she had come to a fate worse than death. "I'm Isaac Hart," he said after they'd been traveling for some time. "May I know your name?" "Dahlia," she replied. "Dahlia Montgomery." "Well, Miss Montgomery, if you don't mind my asking, how did a Boston lady find herself in such a predicament?" She hesitated, unsure whether to trust him with her story, but there was something in his steady gaze that compelled honesty. "My father was a merchant," she began. "He died 6 months ago, leaving substantial debts I knew nothing about. His business partner, Mr. Willard, offered to marry me and settle the debts. When I refused," she swallowed hard. "He arranged for me to be abducted. I was told I would be working as a governess in San Francisco. By the time I realized the truth, we were already deep in the Western Territories." Isaac's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry that happened to you. There are men in this world who deserve a special place in hell." They fell into silence as the wagon rumbled along the dusty trail. The landscape was unlike anything Dahlia had ever seen, vast and wild, with rolling hills giving way to distant mountains. Despite her circumstances, she couldn't help but be awed by its raw beauty. "It's magnificent," she murmured. Isaac glanced at her, a hint of surprise in his expression. "Most Easterners find it desolate." "It's honest," she replied. "There's no pretense here, no hidden corners or secrets. Everything is exposed." He nodded slowly. "That's an insightful way to look at it, though I assure you, Miss Montgomery, the West has plenty of secrets of its own." As the day wore on, Dahlia found herself gradually relaxing in Isaac's presence. He didn't press her with questions or unwanted conversation, seeming content to let the silence stretch between them. Occasionally, he would point out landmarks or name the wildflowers that dotted the landscape. His knowledge and evident love of the land spoke of a man deeply rooted in this place. By late afternoon, they crested a hill and Isaac reined in the horses. "There it is," he said, gesturing to the valley below. "Hart's Crossing." Dahlia leaned forward, taking in the sight of a substantial ranch spread across the valley floor. A large main house built of timber and stone stood at its center, surrounded by several outbuildings, corrals, and pastures where cattle grazed. A creek wound through the property, its banks lined with cottonwood trees. "It's beautiful," she said sincerely. Isaac's expression softened with pride. "My father started with nothing but a dream and 20 head of cattle. Now we run over 2,000 head and employ 15 ranch hands." He clicked to the horses, and they began their descent into the valley. As they approached the main house, Dahlia noticed a plump, gray-haired woman emerge onto the porch, shading her eyes against the setting sun. "That's Mrs. Potts," Isaac explained. "She's been our housekeeper since I was a boy. Don't let her gruff manner fool you. She has the kindest heart in the territory." The wagon pulled up to the house, and Isaac set the brake before jumping down. He came around to Dahlia's side and offered his hand to help her down. She hesitated only briefly before accepting it, noting the calluses that spoke of a life of honest work. "Isaac Hart," Mrs. Potts called out, hands on her ample hips. "You were supposed to be bringing back supplies, not company." Her sharp eyes took in Dahlia's disheveled appearance and dirty dress, and her expression immediately softened. "Oh, you poor dear. Come inside this instant." Isaac cleared his throat. "Mrs. Potts, this is Miss Dahlia Montgomery. She'll be our guest for a while." The older woman's eyes flicked between them, clearly curious but too well-mannered to pry. "Well then, let's get you settled. I'll draw a hot bath and find you something clean to wear." Dahlia felt tears sting her eyes at this simple kindness. "Thank you," she managed. "I'll see to the horses," Isaac said. "Mrs. Potts will take good care of you, Miss Montgomery." As he led the team away, Dahlia followed the housekeeper into the house. To her surprise, it was not the rough cabin she had expected, but a well-appointed home with polished wooden floors, comfortable furniture, and shelves lined with books. It spoke of prosperity tempered with taste rather than ostentation. Mrs. Potts led her upstairs to a guest bedroom with a large window overlooking the valley. "The bathroom is through that door," she said, indicating a connecting room. "I'll start heating water for your bath and find you something suitable to wear, Mr. Hart's sister left some dresses when she married and moved to Denver last year. You look to be about her size." Left alone, Dahlia sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. Just hours ago, she had been facing a life of servitude or worse. Now she was in a beautiful home, being treated with dignity and kindness. It seemed too good to be true, and experience had taught her to be wary of unexpected generosity from men. Yet something about Isaac Hart's straightforward manner and clear eyes made her want to trust him. He had not looked at her with the predatory gaze she had come to dread during her journey west. Instead, there had been something like recognition in his eyes, as if he understood what it meant to be powerless. Mrs. Potts returned with linens and a simple but pretty blue dress. "Dinner will be ready in an hour," she said. "Take your time with your bath, there's no rush." The hot bath was heaven after weeks of travel. Dahlia scrubbed away the dirt and fear, watching it swirl down the drain. As she dressed in the borrowed clothes, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman who stared back was thinner than she remembered, with shadows beneath her eyes, but still recognizably herself. She had survived. When she descended the stairs, she found Isaac waiting in the sitting room, freshly washed and changed himself. He stood when she entered, his expression warming. "You look much refreshed, Miss Montgomery." "I feel human again," she admitted. "Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Hart." He gestured for her to take a seat. "Please call me Isaac. Mr. Hart was my father." "Then you must call me Dahlia," she replied, settling into a comfortable armchair. "Dahlia," he repeated, and something about the way he said her name made her heart flutter unexpectedly. Mrs. Potts announced dinner, and they moved to the dining room, where a simple but hearty meal awaited them: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and vegetables from the garden. Dahlia realized how hungry she was and ate with appreciation. "Tomorrow I can show you around the ranch if you'd like," Isaac offered as they ate. "Or you can rest. I imagine you're exhausted." "I'd like to see it," she said. "I've never been on a cattle ranch before." He smiled, and the expression transformed his serious face. "Then I'll give you the grand tour, though I should warn you it's not all scenic vistas and galloping horses. Ranching is hard work." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Dahlia said, surprising herself with her own vehemence. "In fact, I'd welcome it, anything to feel useful again." Isaac studied her thoughtfully. "I believe you would." He paused. "May I ask what your plans are? Beyond the immediate future, I mean." Dahlia set down her fork. "To be honest, I haven't had the luxury of making plans recently. I suppose I should return to Boston, but there's nothing left for me there except creditors and gossip." She took a deep breath. "I have an aunt in San Francisco whom I've never met. She might take me in. Or you could stay here," Isaac said quietly. "Not permanently, if that's not what you want. But long enough to decide what you do want." Their eyes met across the table, and Dahlia felt a strange connection to this man she had just met. "Why would you offer that to a stranger?" Isaac's gaze dropped to his plate. "Perhaps because I understand what it's like to have your life upended in an instant, to have to rebuild from nothing." He looked up again, his expression earnest. "Besides, Mrs. Potts could use some help running the house. I can pay you a fair wage. You're offering me employment." Dahlia clarified, relief washing over her. This, at least, was something she could understand: a transaction with clear boundaries. "If that would make you more comfortable, yes, but you're under no obligation. The choice is entirely yours." She considered his offer. The alternative was to leave for an unknown fate with a distant relative who might not welcome her. At least here, she would have time to recover and plan. "I accept," she said finally. "Thank you, Isaac." His smile returned, warming his eyes. "Excellent. We'll start your tour tomorrow." That night, lying in a clean, comfortable bed, Dahlia gazed out her window at the star-filled sky. For the first time in months, she fell asleep without fear clutching at her heart. The next morning, Dahlia woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the distant sounds of ranch life already in full swing. She dressed quickly in the blue dress Mrs. Potts had provided and made her way downstairs, following the smell of coffee and bacon. In the kitchen, she found Mrs. Potts bustling about, preparing breakfast for the ranch hands who were already out working. The older woman greeted her warmly. "Good morning, dear. Did you sleep well? I've saved you some breakfast, Mr. Hart had to ride out early to check on a sick calf, but he said to tell you he'll be back mid-morning for your tour." "Is there anything I can help with?" Dahlia asked, unwilling to simply sit and be waited on. Mrs. Potts gave her an appraising look. "Can you bake?" "Yes, quite well, actually. My mother insisted I learn, even though we had a cook." "Excellent. These men go through bread like locusts. If you could make a few loaves while I prepare dinner, that would be a tremendous help." Dahlia spent the morning working alongside Mrs. Potts, finding comfort in the familiar rhythm of kneading dough and the domestic tranquility of the kitchen. Mrs. Potts proved to be a font of information about the ranch and its owner. "Isaac's father built this place from nothing," she told Dahlia as they worked. "Thomas Hart was a good man, but hard as nails. Drove himself and his son to build something that would last. When the influenza took him and Mrs. Hart 5 years ago, Isaac was only 25. Everyone said he was too young to manage such a large operation, but he proved them wrong." "He seems very capable," Dahlia observed, punching down her dough. Mrs. Potts chuckled. "That he is. Smart as a whip and works harder than any 2 men, but he's alone too much, if you ask me. A man needs more than cattle and land to make a life." Before Dahlia could respond to this pointed comment, they heard the sound of boots on the porch. Isaac appeared in the doorway, removing his hat as he entered. His face brightened at the sight of Dahlia dusted with flour. "I see, Mrs. Potts has already put you to work," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I volunteered," Dahlia replied, suddenly self-conscious about her appearance. "And she's a natural," Mrs. Potts added. "These might be the finest loaves I've seen in years." Isaac's smile widened. "Then we're fortunate to have you, Dahlia. Are you ready for that tour?" She nodded, wiping her hands on a towel. "Just let me wash up." A few minutes later, they were walking across the ranch yard. Isaac pointed out the various buildings: the bunkhouse where the ranch hands lived, the cookhouse where they took their meals, the barns, stables, and workshops where everything from horseshoes to furniture was made. "We try to be as self-sufficient as possible," he explained. The nearest town, Clearwater, is 15 miles away, and the winter snows can make travel impossible for weeks at a time. As they walked, Dahlia noticed how the ranch hands touched their hats respectfully to Isaac, and how he greeted each man by name, often asking about family members or commenting on their work. It was clear they respected him not out of fear, but genuine regard. They reached a corral where several horses were being trained. A tall, lanky man with a shock of red hair was working with a spirited bay mare, speaking to her in low, soothing tones as she pranced nervously. "That's Deacon Miller, our horse trainer," Isaac said. "He has a way with even the most difficult animals." As if to demonstrate, the mare suddenly calmed under Deacon's gentle hands, allowing him to stroke her neck. "It's all about trust," Deacon called over, having noticed them watching. "Ain't that right, Mr. Hart?" "In horses and in people," Isaac agreed. They continued their tour, walking to a rise that overlooked much of the ranch. In the distance, Dahlia could see cattle grazing and cowboys on horseback moving among them. 2,000 acres, Isaac said, a note of pride in his voice. "My father started with just 100. Each year we added more, built more, this land. It gets into your blood. Dahlia gazed out at the vast landscape. I can see why. There's something elemental about it. Exactly, he said, looking at her with newfound appreciation. Most people don't understand that. They see only empty space or dollars and cents. It's not empty at all, she observed. It's full of life and possibility. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the breeze ruffling Dahlia's hair. She was surprised by how comfortable she felt in this man's presence, given all that had happened to her. Would you like to learn to ride? Isaac asked suddenly. A proper lady's saddle, of course, not the Western style. Dahlia hesitated. I rode a little in Boston, but only in the park. Nothing like. She gestured at the open country before them. We'll start slow, he promised, but there's no better way to see the ranch than on horseback. The idea was both frightening and exhilarating. Yes, she decided. I'd like that. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Mornings, Dahlia helped Mrs. Potts with household tasks, cooking, cleaning, mending. In the afternoons, Isaac would teach her to ride. He was a patient instructor, never pushing her beyond her comfort level but encouraging her to try new challenges. He selected a gentle mare named Daisy for her, and true to his word, provided a proper side saddle. Dahlia found that she enjoyed riding more than she'd expected. There was something freeing about moving across the land with the wind in her hair, seeing new vistas open before her. By the end of her first week at Hart's Crossing, Dahlia felt stronger and more hopeful than she had in months. The nightmare of the auction and her abduction began to recede, though it still haunted her dreams occasionally. She would wake gasping, only to be soothed by the sight of the stars through her window and the knowledge that she was safe. One evening, as she and Isaac sat on the porch after dinner, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, he asked the question she had been dreading. Will you tell me what happened, how you ended up at that auction? His voice was gentle, without demand. Dahlia took a deep breath. She owed him the truth after all he had done for her. After my father died, I discovered we were deeply in debt. His business partner, Edwin Willard, had been embezzling funds for years, but made it appear as though my father was responsible. I confronted him with evidence I had found in my father's papers. She paused, the memory still raw. He offered me a choice: marry him, and he would make the evidence disappear, or face ruin and possibly prison for my father's supposed crimes. Isaac's face darkened. And when you refused, he arranged for me to be kidnapped. I was told I was being taken to a position as a governess in San Francisco. There were 3 other women in the wagon. 2 were sold before me. She swallowed hard. I later learned that Willard had sold me to pay off his gambling debts to a man named Jackson, who runs a network trafficking women to mining towns and cattle camps. Isaac's hands gripped the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles whitened. These men have names and faces. They can be found. Dahlia shook her head. What would be the point? It would be my word against theirs, and Willard is a respected businessman in Boston society. Justice would be the point, Isaac said quietly, but I understand if you don't want to pursue it. They sat in silence for a time, the twilight deepening around them. What about you? Dahlia finally asked. You said you understood what it was like to have your life upended. What did you mean? Isaac's expression grew distant. During the war, I served with the Union cavalry. I saw things. Did things? He shook his head. When I came home, I couldn't be the person I was before. My parents didn't understand. They wanted me to pick up where I'd left off, court a suitable girl, take over the ranch as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed, Dahlia said softly. Everything, he agreed. Including me. It took years before I felt whole again. This land helped heal me. The simple rhythm of the seasons, the honest work. Dahlia understood now why he had rescued her, why he offered her refuge without expectation. He knew what it meant to be lost and found again. As the weeks passed, Dahlia found herself settling into life at Hart's Crossing. She expanded her duties beyond the kitchen, taking over the household accounts, which she discovered were in some disarray. Isaac seemed grateful for her organizational skills and business acumen. "You have a head for figures," he remarked one evening as they reviewed the ranch's books together. "Better than mine, certainly." "My father insisted I learn," she explained. He said a woman should always understand money, even if society deemed it unfeminine. "A wise man," Isaac said. "If you'd like, you could take over more of the bookkeeping. It would free me up for other tasks." Dahlia felt a surge of satisfaction. "I'd enjoy that very much." Their evenings often ended this way, sitting together in the study, discussing the ranch's operations, sharing stories of their pasts, or simply reading in companionable silence. Dahlia found herself looking forward to these quiet hours more than anything else in her day. Sometimes, she would catch Isaac watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, thoughtful, almost wistful. It made her heart beat faster in a way that both thrilled and frightened her. After what she had been through, the idea of any romantic entanglement seemed impossible. And yet, one Sunday afternoon in late September, about a month after her arrival, Isaac suggested they pack a picnic and ride to a special spot on the property. "It's my favorite place on the ranch," he told her. "I think you'll like it too." They rode for about an hour, Dahlia now comfortable enough on horseback to manage an easy trot alongside Isaac. He led her through a stand of cottonwoods and over a small rise where a hidden valley suddenly opened before them. A crystal-clear pond fed by a small waterfall lay nestled among rocks and wildflowers. The water reflected the blue sky and surrounding trees like a perfect mirror. "Oh," Dahlia exclaimed, "it's magical." Isaac smiled at her delight. "My sister and I discovered it when we were children. We called it the Secret Lake." They dismounted and spread a blanket near the water's edge. Mrs. Potts had packed them a feast: cold chicken, fresh bread, cheese, and apple pie. They ate with the appetite that comes from riding in the open air, talking easily about everything and nothing. After they had finished, Isaac stretched out on the blanket, his hat over his face to shield it from the sun. Dahlia sat beside him, sketching the scene in a small notebook she had brought along. "You draw?" he asked, peeking from under his hat. "Not well," she admitted, "but I enjoy it. It helps me remember moments I want to keep." He sat up to look at her sketch. "You're too modest. It's very good." Their faces were suddenly close, and Dahlia felt her breath catch. Isaac's eyes dropped to her lips for the briefest moment before he moved back, clearing his throat. "Would you like to see the waterfall up close?" he asked, his voice slightly rough. She nodded, grateful for the diversion from the charged moment. They walked around the pond to where the small cascade tumbled over rocks into the clear water. The spray created tiny rainbows in the afternoon sunlight. "My sister used to say this was where fairies lived," Isaac said, smiling at the memory. "She would leave little offerings, flowers or berries, hoping to catch a glimpse of them." "Did she ever see one?" Dahlia asked, charmed by the story. "She claimed she did once. Said it was no bigger than a hummingbird with wings like dragonflies." He chuckled. "Elizabeth always had a vivid imagination." "I would have liked her," Dahlia said. "You would have," he agreed, "and she would have adored you. She always wanted a sister." There was something in his tone that made Dahlia look at him more closely. "You miss her?" "Every day," he admitted. "We write, of course, but it's not the same. Her husband is a banker in Denver. They have 2 children now. Do you ever visit?" "Not as often as I should. The ranch." He gestured vaguely. "The ranch will survive a week without you," Dahlia said gently. "Your foreman is very capable." Isaac looked surprised, then thoughtful. "You're right, of course. Perhaps this winter after the cattle drive." They began walking back toward their picnic spot, Isaac occasionally pointing out native plants and their uses. As they reached the blanket, Dahlia's foot caught on a hidden rock. She stumbled, and Isaac's hand shot out to catch her. The momentum brought her against his chest, his arms instinctively wrapping around her to steady her. For a heartbeat, they stood frozen, their faces inches apart. Dahlia could feel the solid warmth of him, Smell the clean scent of soap and sun-warmed skin. Something shifted in Isaac's eyes, a decision made or a barrier falling slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. He lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle, almost reverent, his lips barely brushing hers. Dahlia's eyes fluttered closed, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. The kiss deepened slightly, still tender but with an undercurrent of something more, a promise, a question. When they finally parted, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the moment you started baking bread in my kitchen," he confessed, his voice husky. Dahlia's heart was racing, her emotions a tangle of exhilaration and fear. "Isaac, he stepped back immediately, giving her space. "I'm sorry if that was presumptuous. I would never want to make you uncomfortable." "No," she said quickly. "It wasn't that, it's just—" She struggled to find the words. "After everything that's happened, I'm not sure I know how to trust this feeling." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Dahlia, listen to me. There's no rush, no expectations. What happened to you was unconscionable, and I understand if you need time. I just wanted you to know how I feel." He took her hand gently. "I care for you deeply, more than I thought possible after knowing someone for such a short time." She looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his earnest face. "I care for you too," she admitted softly, "but I'm afraid." "Of me?" he asked, looking pained. "No," she said firmly. "Of hoping for something and having it snatched away again, of building a life only to see it crumble." Isaac nodded slowly. "I understand fear, Dahlia. I lived with it for years after the war. Sometimes I still do." He squeezed her hand. "All I ask is that you give us a chance to see what might grow between us. At your pace, not mine." The sincerity in his eyes made her throat tight with emotion. "I think I can do that," he smiled, the tension easing from his shoulders. "Then that's enough for now." He glanced at the lowering sun. "We should head back before it gets dark." As they rode home in the golden light of late afternoon, Dahlia felt as though something fundamental had shifted. The kiss had changed things between them, bringing into the open feelings that had been growing quietly for weeks. She was still afraid, still uncertain of what the future might hold, but for the first time since her father's death, she felt a fragile hope taking root in her heart. Back at the ranch, life continued its steady rhythm, but with subtle differences. Isaac's hand would linger when he helped her mount her horse. Their fingers would brush as they passed documents across the desk. In the evenings, they sat closer on the porch, sometimes holding hands as they watched the stars emerge. They shared more kisses, too brief, sweet moments stolen in the privacy of the garden or the stables. Isaac never pushed for more, seemingly content to let their relationship unfold naturally. His patience and respect only deepened Dahlia's growing feelings for him. October brought the cattle drive, when most of the ranch hands and Isaac himself would be gone for 2 weeks, taking a portion of the herd to the railhead in Cheyenne. The night before he was to leave, they sat together on the porch swing, a woolen blanket draped over their laps against the autumn chill. "I've never been away from you since you arrived," Isaac said, his arm around her shoulders. "I find I don't like the idea." Dahlia leaned her head against him. "I'll miss you too, but I'll be fine with Mrs. Potts and the remaining hands. Deacon will be staying behind. If you need anything at all, he's trustworthy." Isaac hesitated. "Dahlia, when I return, there's something important I want to ask you." Her heart skipped a beat. "Isaac," he placed a gentle finger against her lips. "No, don't say anything now. I want you to have these 2 weeks to think, to be sure of what you want." He kissed her forehead. "I've learned in life that the most important decisions shouldn't be rushed." The next morning, Dahlia stood in the yard watching the cattle drive depart, a sea of brown and white backs moving like a living river, guided by men on horseback. Isaac rode back briefly to tip his hat to her, his eyes conveying what words could not. Then he was gone, disappearing over the ridge with his men and cattle. The days without Isaac stretched longer than Dahlia had anticipated. She threw herself into her work, taking on additional responsibilities in his absence. She reorganized the storage rooms, inventoried supplies, and rode out with Deacon to check on the remaining cattle. The physical labor helped distract her from both missing Isaac and contemplating the question he intended to ask upon his return. In her heart, she already knew what her answer would be. Somewhere between the auction block and the secret lake, she had fallen in love with Isaac Hart, with his integrity, his quiet strength, his capacity for kindness. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. It was during the second week of Isaac's absence that Dahlia began to feel unwell. At first, she dismissed it as fatigue from her increased workload. But when she found herself unable to keep down her breakfast 3 mornings in a row, a different possibility occurred to her. She and Isaac had never been intimate beyond kisses and embraces. But counting back to her last monthly cycle, Dahlia realized with a start that she was late, very late. In the stress and upheaval of her abduction and subsequent rescue, she hadn't noticed. With growing certainty and not a little fear, Dahlia came to understand that she was carrying a child conceived in violence during her captivity, before Isaac found her. The realization left her reeling. What would Isaac think? Would his feelings for her change? And what kind of mother could she be to a child whose father had purchased her like property? Mrs. Potts noticed her distress, but misattributed it to missing Isaac. "He'll be home in a few days, dear," she reassured Dahlia. "The drive went well. We got a telegram from Cheyenne yesterday." Dahlia nodded mechanically, her mind elsewhere. She needed to decide what to do before Isaac returned. If she told him the truth, would he still want her? And if she didn't, could she live with such a deception between them? The day before Isaac was expected to return, Dahlia rode out alone to the secret lake. She needed solitude to think, to make perhaps the most important decision of her life. Sitting by the water's edge, watching the play of light on its surface, she placed a hand on her still flat stomach. Despite the circumstances of its conception, she already felt protective of the tiny life growing within her. This child was innocent, blameless for the sins of its father. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "I will love you, I promise." By the time she rode back to the ranch, Dahlia had made her decision. She would tell Isaac the truth immediately upon his return. If he rejected her, she would understand, though it would break her heart. But she could not build a life with him on a foundation of lies. The cattle drive returned late the following afternoon, the men tired but satisfied with the prices they had secured for the herd. Dahlia watched from the porch as Isaac dismounted, his face lighting up at the sight of her despite his exhaustion. He climbed the steps, removing his hat. "I missed you," he said simply. "And I you," she replied, her heart pounding with nervousness. "Let me clean up and then we can talk," he said, seeming to sense her tension. Dahlia nodded, her throat too tight for words. An hour later, freshly bathed and changed, Isaac found her in the garden. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the carefully tended beds now mostly dormant for the coming winter. "You look troubled," he said, taking her hands in his. "What is it?" Dahlia took a deep breath. "Before you ask me what you intended to ask, there's something you need to know." She steeled herself. "Isaac, I'm with child." His eyes widened, his gaze dropping briefly to her midsection before returning to her face. Confusion rather than anger was his first reaction. "But we haven't." "It's not yours," she said quickly. "It happened during my captivity before the auction." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by a flash of rage that she knew was not directed at her. His hands tightened around hers. "Did someone force you?" Dahlia nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Isaac closed his eyes briefly, his jaw clenching. When he opened them again, there was a fierce protectiveness in his gaze. "Are you certain about the child?" "As certain as I can be without a doctor's confirmation," she said. "I've been ill in the mornings, and I'm late, very late." He was silent for a long moment, processing this information. Dahlia held her breath, waiting for his rejection. "This doesn't change what I was going to ask you," he said finally. She stared at him in disbelief. "Isaac, did you hear what I said? I'm carrying another man's child, a child conceived in violence." "I heard you," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "And I say again, it changes nothing." He took a deep breath. "Dahlia Montgomery, I love you. I want to marry you if you'll have me, and I will love this child as my own because it is a part of you." Tears spilled down Dahlia's cheeks. "How can you say that? You don't know what you're taking on." "I know exactly what I'm taking on," he countered. "A woman of extraordinary courage and grace, and the privilege of raising a child with her." He cupped her face tenderly. "This baby is innocent, Dahlia. And if you can find it in your heart to love it despite how it came to be, how could I do any less?" Dahlia's tears flowed freely now. "I do love you, Isaac, more than I thought possible, but are you sure, truly sure?" In answer, he knelt before her, still holding her hands. "Dahlia Montgomery, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Will you allow me to love and protect you and your child for all the days of my life?" Through her tears, Dahlia smiled. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Isaac Hart." He rose and gathered her in his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. When they parted, he rested his hand gently on her stomach. "Our child," he said firmly. "From this moment on, this is our child." The next morning, they rode into Clearwater to see the doctor and make arrangements for their wedding. Dr. Nelson confirmed Dahlia's pregnancy, estimating she was about 2 months along. The baby would arrive in late spring. "You're in excellent health, Mrs. Montgomery," he assured her. "I see no reason to expect anything but a normal pregnancy and delivery." They were married the following Sunday in the small white church in Clearwater. It was a simple ceremony, attended by the ranch hands, Mrs. Potts, and a few townspeople who had come to know and respect Isaac over the years. Dahlia wore a cream-colored dress that Mrs. Potts had altered to accommodate her still slender figure, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. As they exchanged vows, Dahlia looked into Isaac's eyes and saw nothing but love and certainty. When the minister pronounced them man and wife, and Isaac kissed her before their small gathering of witnesses, she felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she belonged. The ranch hands had prepared a surprise for them, a new sign at the entrance to the property. Where it had once read simply, Hart's Crossing, it now proclaimed Hart's Crossing Ranch Isaac and Dahlia Hart, proprietors. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hart," Isaac said softly as they passed under it on their return from the church. "Home," Dahlia repeated, savoring the word. After so much uncertainty and fear, she had found not just shelter but a true home and a family. The winter months passed in a blur of domestic happiness. As Dahlia's body changed with her advancing pregnancy, Isaac treated her with a tenderness that sometimes brought tears to her eyes. He insisted she rest when needed, brought her special treats from town, and spent evenings reading to her by the fire, his hand often resting protectively on her growing belly. Mrs. Potts, delighted by the marriage and impending birth, knitted endlessly tiny socks, blankets, and caps in soft yellows and greens. "Since we don't know if it's a boy or girl," she explained. For Christmas, Isaac surprised Dahlia with a beautiful cradle he had carved himself during the long evenings of her pregnancy. Made of polished oak with intricate designs of leaves and animals along the sides, it was a masterpiece of craftsmanship. "It's beautiful," Dahlia breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "When did you find time to make this?" Isaac smiled. "I worked on it at night after you fell asleep. I wanted it to be special." As winter gave way to spring, Dahlia's time grew near. Isaac arranged for a midwife from Clearwater to stay at the ranch during her final weeks, unwilling to take any chances with the health of his wife or child. On a bright May morning, with wildflowers carpeting the hills around Hart's Crossing, Dahlia went into labor. The birth was long and difficult, lasting through the day and into the night. Isaac refused to leave her side, holding her hand through each contraction, wiping her brow, and murmuring encouragement. Just as dawn was breaking over the eastern hills, their daughter entered the world with a lusty cry that brought tears to both parents' eyes. "She's perfect," the midwife announced, placing the swaddled infant in Dahlia's arms. A healthy baby girl. Dahlia looked down at the tiny face, overcome with a love so fierce it took her breath away. The baby had a dusting of dark hair, and when she briefly opened them, eyes of deepest blue. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Isaac sat on the edge of the bed, his arm around Dahlia, gazing at his daughter with wonder. "She's beautiful," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "just like her mother." Dahlia looked up at him, her heart full. "What shall we name her?" "I thought perhaps after your mother," Isaac suggested. "You mentioned once that you missed her deeply." Fresh tears welled in Dahlia's eyes at his thoughtfulness. "Isabella," she said softly. "Isabella Rose Hart." Isaac nodded, gently touching the baby's cheek with one finger. "Welcome to the world, Isabella Rose. You are so very loved." In that moment, looking at her husband and daughter, Dahlia felt the last shadows of her ordeal finally lift. The past could not be erased, but it no longer defined her. What mattered was this family they had created not by blood alone, but by choice and love. The news of Isabella's birth spread quickly through the ranch and neighboring properties. Visitors came bearing gifts and well-wishes, handmade quilts, preserved fruits, tiny moccasins crafted by a Cheyenne woman whose son worked on the ranch. Isaac proudly showed off his daughter to everyone, never once giving any indication that she was not his by blood. Indeed, as the weeks passed, it became clear that such distinctions meant nothing to him. He doted on Isabella, walking her when she was fussy, singing old cavalry songs as lullabies, and spending hours simply watching her sleep. By her 3rd month, Isabella had developed a smile that could melt the hardest heart. Her eyes had settled into a deep brown, and her hair grew in thick and dark. She was a happy baby, curious about everything around her. "She has your determination," Isaac told Dahlia one evening as they watched Isabella persistently reaching for a toy just beyond her grasp. "Never gives up." Dahlia leaned against his shoulder. "And your patience," she countered, as Isaac gently moved the toy within the baby's reach, rewarding her efforts. Summer gave way to fall, and fall to winter again. Isabella grew and thrived, taking her first tentative steps just before her 1st birthday. The ranch prospered under their joint management, with Dahlia's business acumen complementing Isaac's practical knowledge of cattle and land. They began making improvements to the main house, adding a nursery adjacent to their bedroom and expanding the kitchen to Mrs. Potts' delight. Isaac also built a small schoolroom, explaining that he wanted Isabella to have the best education possible, even in this remote location. "We'll hire a proper teacher when she's old enough," he said. "And perhaps other children from neighboring ranches can come too." "You're planning quite far ahead," Dahlia teased, though she was touched by his foresight. "I want her to have every opportunity," he said simply, "to become whoever she wants to be." As Isabella's 2nd birthday approached, Dahlia realized she had been feeling unusually tired lately. At first, she attributed it to the demands of motherhood and running the ranch. But when she began experiencing the same morning sickness she had known with Isabella, she understood. She waited until they were alone in their bedroom one night to tell Isaac. "I believe we're going to have another child," she said, watching his face carefully. His expression transformed from surprise to joy in an instant. "Truly?" he asked, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "Truly," she confirmed, covering his hand with her own. "This spring, I think." Isaac gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of the most precious material. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "I love our family." "Our family," Dahlia echoed, the words still sometimes feeling like a miracle. From the auction block to this moment, it was a journey she could scarcely have imagined that terrible day when Isaac first saw her. Their son, Thomas Isaac Hart, was born on a stormy April night when the rain lashed against the windows and thunder rolled across the valley. Unlike his sister's birth, Thomas arrived quickly and easily, almost eager to join the world. He had a shock of reddish-gold hair and eyes that shifted from blue to green depending on the light. "He looks like you," Dahlia told Isaac as they admired their newborn son. "Poor child," Isaac joked, but she could see the emotion in his eyes. This child, conceived in love between them, was a living symbol of how far they had come. Isabella, now 2.5, was fascinated by her baby brother. "Gentle, gentle," she would say in her small voice as she carefully patted his head, mimicking her parents' instructions. Life settled into a new rhythm with 2 children. The days were fuller, more chaotic at times, but filled with a deep contentment that neither Dahlia nor Isaac took for granted. They had both known loss and hardship. They understood the precious nature of the happiness they had found. When Thomas was 6 months old, a letter arrived that disrupted their peaceful existence. It was addressed to Dahlia in an unfamiliar hand, postmarked from Boston. She opened it with trembling fingers, Isaac watching her with concern. As she read, her face paled. "What is it?" he asked. "Edwin Willard is dead," she said flatly. "Apparently he drank himself to death after his business collapsed." She continued reading. "This is from a lawyer. It seems Willard left a confession, admitting to his embezzlement and to arranging my abduction. The lawyer writes that my father's name has been cleared, and there is a small estate that rightfully belongs to me." Isaac sat beside her, taking her hand. "How do you feel about this?" Dahlia considered the question. "Relieved that my father's reputation is restored, but otherwise, it seems like news from another lifetime. That person who lived in Boston, who was betrayed by Willard, she feels like someone I used to know, not who I am now." "And who are you now?" Isaac asked softly. She looked up at him, then at their children, Isabella playing with wooden blocks on the floor, Thomas sleeping peacefully in his cradle. "I'm Dahlia Hart, wife, mother, rancher. This is who I was meant to be." Isaac kissed her hand. "Do you want to go to Boston?" "To claim the estate?" "No," she said decisively. "The lawyer can sell whatever assets remain and transfer the funds. I have no desire to return east." She squeezed his hand. "Everything I want is right here." The funds from her father's estate eventually arrived, a modest sum, but enough to make significant improvements to the ranch. They built a new, larger barn, purchased additional breeding stock, and set aside money for the children's education. Years passed. Isabella grew into a spirited, intelligent girl with her mother's grace and her father's love of the land. Thomas followed in his father's footsteps, taking to ranching as naturally as breathing. When Dahlia gave birth to their 3rd child, a daughter they named Elizabeth after Isaac's sister, their family felt complete. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Isaac surprised Dahlia with a special gift, the deed to the secret lake and the surrounding acres, officially registered as Dahlia's Haven. "So it will always be your special place," he explained. "No matter what happens with the ranch in future generations." Dahlia, touched beyond words, could only kiss him in response. That evening, they sat together on the porch of the home they had built and expanded over the years, watching their children play in the yard as the sun set over Hart's Crossing. Isabella, now 11, was teaching 7-year-old Thomas and 4-year-old Elizabeth a game involving much running and laughter. "Did you ever imagine this?" Dahlia asked, her head resting on Isaac's shoulder. "That day at the auction, when you saw me on that platform." Isaac tightened his arm around her. "I knew I wanted to help you," he said thoughtfully. "I knew something about you called to something in me, but this—" he gestured to their home, their children, the life they had built together. "This exceeded even my wildest hopes." Dahlia closed her eyes, savoring the moment, the solid warmth of her husband beside her, the joyful sounds of their children, the sense of peace that had once seemed so elusive. From the auction block to this porch, it was a journey marked by courage, trust, and above all, love. A love that had seen beyond circumstances, beyond fear, beyond the expectations of the world around them. A love that had created a family and a home where once there had been only uncertainty and despair. "I love you, Isaac Hart," she said softly. Thank you for seeing me that day, truly seeing me. I love you too, Dahlia Hart, he replied, kissing her forehead. And I always will, until my last breath and beyond. As twilight deepened into night, they called the children in for supper. Later, they would tuck them into bed with stories and kisses. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and Joy's cattle to tend, lessons to teach, a ranch to run. But they would face it all together, just as they had every day since Isaac had cut the ropes from Dahlia's wrists and offered her not just freedom, but a future. It was not the life either of them had expected, but it was the one they had chosen, day by day, moment by moment. And in that choice lay the truest definition of love, not the absence of hardship, but the decision to face it side by side, hand in hand, heart to heart. Under the vast, starry sky of the western night, Hart's Crossing stood as a testament to that love-a-place where two souls had found each other against all odds and built something that would endure long after they were gone. Their legacy would live on not just in the land or the ranch, but in their children and their children's children, a dynasty founded not on blood alone, but on the far stronger foundation of compassion, courage, and unwavering love.